Ruby Bridges by Jaden Miller,
Christopher James,
Terrell Creed,
and Anaya.
The time period of when Ruby Bridges went to an all-white school, segregation was a big thing. Brown versus Board of Education was a landmark in 1954 Supreme Court case in which the racial segregation of children in public schools was against the law. Segregation mostly affected African American lives because they were discriminated against. White people thought they were superior to darker skinned and black people. All people are equal, and we wish they knew that back then. Ruby Bridges had a hard time in school because of people judging and bullying her. She went to get a better education, and doing so, she made a lot of people mad.
The event that was going on during the time period of Ruby Bridges was Brown versus Board of Education. Ruby Bridges was preparing herself by going to school every day and not letting the disrespectful people get to her. She went to school with a smile on her face, even though people were judging her by the color of her skin. Ruby Bridges was brave enough to go to a school where all the kids did was judge her for her race. All this was possible because of Brown versus Board of Education, because Brown versus Board of Education is one of the main things that led to desegregation. It all started with Brown versus Board of Education. The Board of Education let African American kids attend all white schools. But most of the white people at this time did not like this, so they decided to do something. These people went outside of the school and said very hurtful things towards Ruby. Every day, Ruby had to get escorted to school by U.S. Marshals. They decided to physically harm Ruby, which goes to show how bad racism was back then. Every day, Ruby went to school and endured this. When Ruby was in school, she still had to go through all of the kids being mean to her as well. Even though Ruby had to go through all of this, she still loved school and got the best grades in the class. Ruby's teacher was very kind towards Ruby, or at least the first teacher was. Like every time Ruby didn't feel good, the teacher would cheer her up. You would think she always felt bad, but no, Ruby was a huge optimist. So every day she was escorted to school with around 6 to 10 U.S. Marshals. Through the yelling around, the angry white people yelling hurtful things and even trying to hurt her. And even when she was in school, she was bullied by everyone, but she persevered.
Ever since the schools were desegregated, kids have slowly been getting more and more used to schools being desegregated. It took a little while for us to get to where we are now, but we have Brown versus Board of Education and Ruby Bridges to thank because our schools are unsegregated right now. Of course, it took a super long time to get here and probably a lot longer than what it should have took. But because of Ruby and the Board of Education, our schools today are unsegregated. Not only black and white people, all races are allowed, which is amazing. But Ruby played a huge important role in desegregating schools because she was the first African American to attend an all-white school, and it inspired other young African Americans to attend all-white schools, which helped the whole situation with desegregation. So, because of Ruby, we are where we are today. After Brown versus the Board of Education desegregated their schools, other African Americans started attending many other all-white schools. But because of this, white people were even more frustrated than before. As the years passed, more and more African American kids entered what was all-white schools. But right when Ruby transferred to the all-white school, the people were quick to react and reacted in quite a negative way. And because of all this negativity getting thrown Ruby's way, she had to go to school not feeling safe and getting constant hurtful stuff yelled at her. So basically, right when Ruby was transferred, her life flipped and it got so much harder for her. But she managed. Brown versus the Board of Education desegregation changed many educations of young African American because all white schools were much better in comparison to all black.
Ruby Bridges was a 6-year-old African American girl who went to an all-white school in the 1960s when segregation existed. Brown versus Board of Education is one of the main things that helped desegregation. Ruby Bridges was a brave little girl to go through all of the hate. The white kids that went to her school said very hurtful words, and it is bad enough she had to deal with that inside of the school, but when she was outside heading towards the school, she was still bullied by all the people. It was hard to endure so much hate in her life, but she managed.
My parents only said, Ruby, you're going to go to a new school today, and you better behave. There was a knock at the door. My parents opened the door, and 4 very tall white men were standing at the door. And I remember looking at them and thinking, well, who are they?
Those 4 men were United States Marshals sent under order of President Eisenhower. Their job was to escort Ruby to and from school. One of the men was Charles Burks.
Well, we had a lot of demonstrations against what we were doing. The main thing was just be sure nothing happened to her. So we'd tell her, just stay close to us. We'll be all right.
There were barricades everywhere. There were cameras everywhere. I thought I'd stumbled into a parade. I actually thought it was Mardi Gras.
It didn't seem to bother her any. She was just doing what she had been told to do.
Ruby's mother went as well. Once inside, they were taken to the principal's office where they stayed all day. There, they watched white parents scramble in and out of classrooms, taking their children out of school.
500 kids walked out of school that day. And I didn't know what was going on because nobody explained anything to me. Finally, the bell rang and someone came into the office and they said, school is dismissed. You can leave. And I remember sitting there and thinking, wow, college is easy.
By the next day, the crowds had doubled.
And they kept pointing at me and shouting. They kept saying, we're gonna poison her. We're gonna hang her.
I was in favor of what we were doing. I knew what we were doing was right, and we were going to make sure it happened.